This is a real pleasure. So Jean-Luc Pierte is going to be the facilitator for this discussion. And I'll let him introduce himself, but he's the president of the North American Indian Center of Boston. He has a returning BioSummit speaker. We are really excited to present this panel on Indigenous Survivance. We've got Margarita Mora, who's the managing director of Tero, Beno, Juarez, who's co-director of Fab Lab Lima, and Leong is joining us from Hawaii. He's the chief executive director of Kupu. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Beno. So if I can have Lizzie go ahead and spotlight our speakers. So Beno and the three speakers, and let's go ahead and kick this off. Beno, you're up.
You mean Jean-Luc?
Or Jean-Luc, sorry.
Is it me? Is it Beno? I can yeah. Heri hotu, ima Jean-Luc Pierte tisa. My name is Jean-Luc Pierte. I'm originally from New Orleans. I'm a member of the Tunica Biloxi tribe of Louisiana, a federally recognized indigenous nation here in the United States. And I'm calling today from Boston, Massachusetts, which at North American Indian Center of Boston, we recognize it as the traditional indigenous territory of the Massachusetts Nation, who continue to this day in part through their lineal descendants, the Massachusetts tribe at Ponkapog. And Allison, I'm happy for you to be here. I know that when I've done I've done land acknowledgements before, you've definitely stood with me. I just wanted to make sure, clarify, like, am I driving like any screen sharing for slides and everything? Okay, cool. I'm gonna go ahead and grab this really quickly. So share. So this is, oh, let's see. We're here. So yes, so like we said, I'm president of the North American Indian Center of Boston. We are Massachusetts' oldest urban Indian center. As of October 20th, this month, we'll be observing our 50th year of service to the New England Native American community. So the theme for today is Indigenous Survivance. And I wanted to just kind of just call into mind what the intentions behind that framing, and just sort of like what it actually means for me in my own personal framework, and then we'll kind of explore it with our panelists. So last year I did a reading group at NACOP on Indigenous futurism. We read through the anthology Walking the Clouds, as edited by Grace Dillon. And I came across the concept of Indigenous survivance, and as defined by the Anishinaabe author, Gerald Visner. So survivance is an active sense of presence, the continuance of Native stories, not a mere reaction or survivable name. Native survivance stories are renunciations of dominance, tragedy, and victimry. So in the context of this panel, this describes how communities and nations are looking inward to imagine sustainable futures through community science practices, through deepening tradition, ecological knowledge, and affirming self-determination. And if you haven't, for those folks in the United States or wherever October 12th is observed, I just want to welcome you to this session and wish you a very mindful Indigenous Peoples Day weekend. So let's go ahead and jump into the panel. Our first question for each of our panelists, introduce yourself and the setting within which your work is situated, describe the need, rationale for this work, and some of the overarching issues or questions with which you engage. So I'm going to go ahead and toss that over to Beno from Fab Lab Lima in Peru to talk about his work.
Thank you so much, Super Jean-Luc. It's a great pleasure to be here with you and all these panelists and all these people, an amazing group and community. Well, I come from the Amazon rainforest. I grew up in the Amazon. And the Amazon, it's a very complex territory. It's a paradoxical territory because this is one of the factories of oxygen for the world, But during the pandemic, oxygen was one of the critical resources that local people, especially indigenous people, have not. And also, this is one of the territories that have provided a lot of medicine to the world. But paradoxically, one of the most infected and vulnerable areas in the world, where we have more than 75% of local communities infected, and they have not access to a good health system, etc. Also, the Amazon is one of the biggest storage for CO2, but we are losing this big cooler, no? Because global warming, because the forest fire that we have in many different areas that are killing not only this biodiversity, also all the knowledge inside this biodiversity. But I think the most critical part of the Amazon today, it's local people don't want to be there. When we talk with young people, and we ask them if they want to continue living here in the Amazon and protect the Amazon, they say, I want to leave the Amazon. I cannot find opportunities here. So we are losing the natural guardians of the Amazon today. This is a picture from a local school. It was took 3 years ago, and these are the exactly condition that I had when I studied in the Amazon 30 years ago. Most of the community have not access to electricity, internet, good health, etc. So this is part of the question that we have today here. And how can we reverse this predated system that look the Amazon as a big storage where you took all the resources that you want, but you give back contamination and predation for a new system. We are developing many different projects in order to generate values and provide opportunities to local people. This is where we are today, and I would love to share more details about that during this session. Thank you, Super Jean-Luc.
Thank you, Beno. I'm gonna go ahead and grab the screen back. So our next panelist that we have up is Margarita Mora from Tero. So Margarita, same question to you. Can you give us some background on the current state of your work?
Yeah, hello everyone. It is a pleasure to be here today. I am greeting you from Duwamish territory, also called Seattle. I am based in Seattle, though I am from Ecuador, from the highlands of Ecuador. So if you can go to the next slide, please, Jean-Luc. I am going to share a bit about Tero, which is the organization I am with. And one of the things that it is key for us is focusing on indigenous visions, right? We work alongside indigenous peoples that are upholding their territories and cultures for the health of the planet, but also for the health of all beings, the ones that we see and the ones that we actually do not see, including our ancestors and our descendants. In my case, I grew up in part of my life in the countryside of Ecuador, where I had the opportunity of being together with indigenous peoples and local communities of the highlands, and also of spending a lot of time in nature. And that led me to understand deeply the connection of people to their lands. And at the same time, it led me to be really passionate about thinking about indigenous people's rights. In a way, during the last 16, 17 years, I have been working on envisioning ways for indigenous peoples that manage collective territories, that have governance structures that still respect their traditional governance structures, to figure out ways in which positive and respectful partnerships can be built that actually strengthen their rights and strengthen their self-determined vision of well-being. As an organization, we are working in the northern part of the Amazon, in the Pacific Islands, particularly in Melanesia, as well as in the boreal forest of Canada. We recognize that in these places, indigenous peoples have been able to maintain that close connection to their territories and have the reciprocity, still living within those territories and those relationships. They don't see themselves as owning the territories, but as being part of the territories, right? In many cases, they are the ones that are fighting for those territories to be maintained, not only for them and their children, but for, again, all the beings that are active in those territories. In addition to that, we work a lot on policy issues related to Indigenous peoples and as well on storytelling. And our objective is to do this through Indigenous organizations. We are, as an organization, a polycultural organization with a board that it is more than half Indigenous, with a global advisory council that it is, again, mostly Indigenous, and with a staff that it is Indigenous and non-Indigenous, and that comes from different parts of the world. So that is a bit about what Tero is and a bit about what I do. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Margarita. So next up, we're going to have John Leong, the Chief Executive Director for Kupu in Hawaii. So aloha, John.
Hi, aloha kako. Nice to see all of you, and great to hear from other panelists and the amazing work that's being done across the globe. Well, I'll share a little bit about Kupu and what we're doing in Hawaii. I don't know if I did do an update to the slide this morning. So, oh, it did come in, thank you. So we have worked for the last couple of decades in engaging young adults in service around conservation and sustainability. We use a youth core model. And when I first started, I was more on the science side and the conservation side, doing the actual work. And Hawaii has more endangered species per square mile than any other place in the world. We're the endangered species capital of the world. We've lost a lot due to human impact, a lot, invasive species that have come with humans, and of course degradation of lands and areas too. And as you do the work as an individual, I remember working out in the mountains one day, and we just had a really hard day of work, but it was really satisfying. And we planted like 50 plants, and we taken all this water up the mountainside, and we hiked like 1 hour with gallons of water, and it was just really rewarding. It was tiring work, but then we looked at each other and we said, gosh, all of this hard work, and probably there's some invasive species that grew there's probably 10 times that grew back somewhere else beyond this area that we worked. We have to get more people involved. And I think that's was understanding that the work is so big that we can't just do it as an individual community. We had to broaden the work and make it something that was esoteric and not known by the broader community, and bring it more centralized. And I'd say pairing that with culturally and socially in Hawaii, people love the outdoors here. And in fact, I think a lot of people learn best through doing. And makahana ka ike is a olelo no ea, or a proverb in Hawaiian, which means through working one learns. And unfortunately, the traditional classroom system always isn't the best for everyone. And we found that through doing, not only do people learn about science and nature, but also they find restoration of self too, and purpose. They find the passions through service and giving back. And so it's been really an exciting thing to see happen and grow. We serve about 400 young people in a regular year. This year, we're gonna have about 1,000 people that are employed because of some stimulus funding to get people working in the outdoors during this time, during COVID and post-COVID. And but it's we feel like these are opportunities that we're trying to use to pivot our islands. We have seen some tremendous work from our young people. Over the last 13, 14 years, we've seen over $132 million in social economic impacts. We do alumni surveys, and because of the work that they're doing, we're seeing like 88% of the alumni that respond sharing that they are they're either in a career or actively pursuing a career in a related field. And it's really neat. We took our senators to visit from DC, and we went to one of our sites, and there's 40 people working there, and half of them were either Kupu members or Kupu alumni. And so we were seeing this succession plan happening that we didn't plan on, but it's just naturally starting to occur where all these different organizations, we serve about 150 organizations across Hawaii and the Pacific that host our members. And it's been so neat to see that we're getting Indigenous and local young people now working, and even at the management levels in some organizations now, that are taking the lead in conservation, whereas before it was a lot of people coming from outside of Hawaii because there were no pathways to get young people working in these areas. So we're really excited to see this impact, and I'm really excited to be here with you guys today. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Beno. Thank you, Margarita. So we have a couple of questions that I'm gonna give to the panel. But after these two questions, we're gonna open it up to Q&A. So please do, as you have thoughts through the panel's responses, put them in the chat. I believe that are we going to be unmuting people for them to actually say their
go
questions?
ahead and just let everybody unmute themselves. This is a small enough group.
Okay, all right. Yeah, so two questions, and then we'll open up for Q&A. So the first question. So how have you navigated issues of intellectual property and ownership of traditional knowledge by the community as a whole in your group? So I know that the purpose of this panel is like to help raise the consciousness of community science practices, and one of the points of tension when it comes to community-based research within Indigenous communities is that concept of intellectual property. So can you talk a little bit about it from each of your work?
Yeah, please let me continue with this order. And yeah, I think one important key is the protection, of course, of the knowledge. But one of the risks is what do you do with this knowledge, with this it's a huge potential that Indigenous people have in terms of multicultural and biodiversity. Because if we protect, but if we don't generate values, we will continue losing the Amazon. Because the local people will prefer, it's in my experience, local people will prefer extractive activities because they need to survive, they need to pay schools, pay, etc. And they have to extract and cut trees, etc. But if they start to generate a new economy, so this is a key, how can we create values and a new economy based not in a extractive resources system, but maybe it generate values through the knowledge and biodiversity that we have. For example, we have different communities, local communities that work as an artisans, and of course this product in the market has not too much values right now. How could we empower local communities, and how could we generate more values with this amazing knowledge, and how could we, for example, provide amazing knowledge that we have in the community as thanks to this program, How to Grow Almost Anything, a few years ago, we started to connect the knowledge with local communities as Soila from Witoto community in the north of, where the Amazon River is born, And for example, how could they apply this knowledge to the local resources, They have been working a lot with bee walks, and we started to create this integration of knowledge and explore how could we use bee walks in order to generate a new generation of 3D printers. For example, using bee walks as a base of material for a new version of printers. Another amazing resources that we have, it's, for example, superfoods. We have superfoods, but paradoxically, in the Amazon, we have one of the biggest regions in Peru, with child malnutrition. So how could we generate values with that? So we are exploring also these printers for nutrients that could provide customized nutrients for kids. And also it could be a good strategy to manage the subtractive process in the Amazon. Because when you, usually what happens in the Amazon, farmers, as my father, for example, they have to grow things, and in the traditional model of market, when you sell a product and people as us in the cities, maybe we buy a potato, or we buy an orange, or we buy bananas, we don't realize that we are directly impacting the biodiversity because we are consuming one single product. So how could we provide farmers, for example, a possibility to produce many different products and go to the market with the same or similar values? So one of the strategies of that is create not a machine to sell a product, but a machine to sell, for example, nutrients, no? And provide this information and empower local communities to manage that and create values with the huge diversity that they have. So finally, we are working, as you know, well, many of you, my friends, knows, well, we are working, create this bridge, no? Create this platform to provide local communities the access to technologies, the access to global innovative communities to develop their own solutions. This is part of the Florin Fab Lab project that we are also developing to generate a biolab, a network of biolabs and fab labs in the Amazon. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, thank you. So same question to Margarita and John. Feel free to jump in if you have some thoughts on intellectual property and indigenous communities.
Yeah, you know, I think that we have to start by saying that a lot of the knowledge that indigenous people hold is knowledge that has been built over thousands of years, right? And reality is that in the Western world, many times that knowledge is not recognized as knowledge. However, the Western world has been really good at taking what they need from that knowledge and using it for its purposes and not even recognizing indigenous people's contributions, which is not small. Without indigenous people's testing for thousands of years, different solutions, the Western world wouldn't have a lot of medicines, right? Let's start from that perspective, right? One of the key things that we are committed at Tero is ensuring that we respect indigenous people's rights and self-determination. And that is including their right to manage and hold their knowledge and protect their knowledge. An example that I want to share with you, because it is not easy, right? It is not an easy task to fully respect all of those rights of indigenous peoples and at the same time address some of the challenges that they face. In the Amazon, as well as in other parts of the world, indigenous territories are highly threatened. There are invasions of territories. People are struggling to survive. It is not an issue of are we going to be good or not? It's like, are we going to die entirely? And COVID right now has exacerbated that situation. We, as an organization, are building a biocultural monitoring system right now with indigenous partners in a way that we start thinking also differently about what monitoring means and what technology access means, so that our indigenous partners can define by themselves the indicators that matter to them. Because reality is that when we use international indicators that everybody knows and agrees, sometimes, and in many places, indigenous peoples are considered as being poor because they might not have the financial access that the Western world requires, right? But nobody's counting what really matters to them, which in many places is having enough food, having strong social relationships, having strong cultural values, having that spirituality that maintains social cohesion, right? And in this aspect, we are in this process of creating this biocultural monitoring framework with the goal of our indigenous partners that want to participate, because again, this is not imposed, but voluntary, that they can define by themselves what matters to them and that what they want to track over time based on their own perspectives and beliefs. And that they have the right to decide what information they want to choose with the outside world, including us, and what information they want to keep for themselves, because they see that it is key information that it's shared more broadly, it wouldn't be good for them, or because they just don't want to share it more broadly. It is their right. And this has been really interesting in terms of thinking about all of the challenges that it implies when you put that together with technology and how you can actually allow certain indicators and information to connect with a global network while others remain just on the territories, and also thinking about what it means in terms of strengthening indigenous people's ability to manage all of these systems. We are thinking and seeing that our indigenous partners that are starting to engage in this are super excited. It is one of the first and only times that in some places of the world, they have access to this information and they can hold the information. Because in many places, again, their experience is that people come ask them questions, grab the information, leaves, and they are left with nothing, right? So in a way, through that process, we are really committed to respecting and maintaining indigenous people's property rights over their own information.
Super, super amazing, John.
Thank you. It's hard going last because I'm listening to all these great thoughts and I'm synthesizing them myself, and then I forget, oh, I got to say something too. But but thank you very much. You know, I really enjoyed what the co-panelists had to share, and I would say to Beno's point about the extractive economy, I really think that this is opportunities to create restorative economies that we're in the season that we're in, and I'm an Obama Foundation fellow. We one of the things that we've got to do over this time is had a smaller Zoom call with President Obama, and one of the things that he had shared during that time was, of course, there's critical needs that people need to get met in terms of food, well-being, housing, and things like that. But as we have the opportunities to look at how we can use situations like this to pivot institutions, pivot situations, so that we can aim more towards the future that we could hope for. And I think that really resonates with what I'm hearing today from the other panelists too, that this is a moment in time, as challenging as it is, where everything is up in the air and people are questioning what do we go back to, and was what we go back to really what we want to be at, where we wanted to be at. And to the great points that Margarita shared too about, how do we make there more equity so that people have wonderful and amazing ideas that are indigenous that can be uplifted, but also give them value as well in so many ways. So I think that this is a really important time. Those of you that are in smaller communities like me in an island, I think it's also feel empowered, because I think that we have the opportunity to be lighthouses in our world. We'll see changes from population growth, climate change, limited resources much faster than the rest of the world. But we also have the opportunity to create systems that can inspire the rest of the world, that can be scalable. And I think that's some things that we've been really looking at Kupu over our time, is how do we create these systems for workforce development and to some degree economic growth for our people that is going to really be transferable and meaningful. And so some of the things that we've been really excited about is that as our young people are getting out there and they're learning, we have, I think they're getting exposed to a lot of things that they didn't know about prior. And one of the areas was culturally. I remember one of the young men that we had gone out to look at a native Hawaiian fish pond. He's native Hawaiian too. And also we have these terraced farm structure called lo'i for growing kalo or taro. And after learning about it and seeing that these things have lasted for centuries, and that they provided abundance of food, that the population when Captain Cook had arrived was close to where it is today. And that there was an abundance sustainably being provided of food within Hawaii. One of the things that I remember from this young man was having a journal entry, and he was writing about, being Native Hawaiian, I always had this feeling, he had the stigma that I'm dumb, I'm not as good as, people that are doing well in the classroom and other people. But I realize now my ancestors were smart. They were ingenious to be able to have these systems that are lasting today that could feed a whole community. And that to me was just so awesome, because it created this pride in him. It created this awareness of the true strength of culture and the knowledge that was shared. And that also too, that there was something that has been lost, that we've come to a global market where we're so reliant now on bananas from Ecuador or from, other places to have the food that we eat, and how we are. And so I think to that point, it's been neat in recent years that we really looking at how do we reverse it, because we import 90% of our food and energy in Hawaii. And you think about all the economy that is being lost, it's being sent abroad because we have become a consumer society focused on tourism. And yet now is the time to really reshape those areas where we can start to rebuild our infrastructure for diversified agriculture, not just monocrops. And so we're really excited about all of those areas. And I don't want to take up more time on this question, but I can happily answer more in the Q&A.
Yes, absolutely. I'm reminded by Allison that we are at halftime. So what I'm going to do, we're going to build off of the group agreements that we've had in previous sessions. So I'm reminded that we are centering the voices of women and non-binary folks within Q&A. So we're just kind of invoking an honor system as far as like getting on, you know, at putting the question out there. This is sort of a brave space for that. But we also want to make sure that those that identify Indigenous as well, that they have the space to ask a question. So does anybody from the audience have a question? Yeah, go ahead, David.
But please, others speak first if there are others. Yeah, go ahead, and if others have questions, but I do have one.
Seeing no hands raised, let me go to gallery view just in case. So I don't see any hands raised. So yeah, go on ahead, David.
Okay. Well, first off, I just wanted to say you all are just so mind-blowingly inspiring. I'm just sitting here with like, I just feel all the feels right now just listening to you all talk. And yeah, I think it's a real awakening. And for all of I just wish I could take everything you're saying and just broadcast it out to the world, because I feel like everybody really needs to hear what you all are talking about. One question that I had was, you know, I think all of you have touched on this in different ways, but we live in this modern world with this kind of, you know, built on, you know, kind of reductionist approaches to science. And, you know, it's given us all of these marvelous technologies. And so that's, you know, one part of the story. But then the other part of the story is this incredible destruction of the earth and so many of the, you know, potentially civilization ending consequences of what has led us to some of these things that we benefit from. And so much of what you all are talking about is lifting up these, you know, Indigenous values and perspectives that, you know, really could, when we're thinking about trying to re-envision the world, lead us in another direction. And so, but I'm wondering though, is how do we kind of marry and reconcile these two things? Like, is there a way for us to bring technologies like a lot of what we're talking about in this conference with, you know, synthetic biology and all, you know, so many of the other sessions that are going on are all these nerd out sessions on these really amazing tools. Is there a way for us to kind of harmonize these two perspectives and hopefully, you know, uplift our civilization to someplace new? And I guess that's for any of you that wants to answer.
I can start from the workforce side, and I think that that's definitely an area that's really important. And as I mentioned, we're doing a stimulus project right now where we're hiring about 500 young adults, and it's really, I think there's probably technology and there's innovation, and I'd say both are really important. So the work that we're doing doesn't take rocket science. I mean, a lot of the young people that go out there are doing really important work, restoring native species and ecosystems, but I think that what's been really cool is that our partners have really integrated in technology into the work that's being done, from drones to using, you know, in LiDAR, and then having different applications of GPS, GIS, and then also just different ways that we're looking at agroecology and integrating that in terms of creating natural pesticides that will keep pests at bay versus using chemicals. And so there's a lot of really cool things that our young people are learning that can be elevated and integrated. That being said too, part of this program is that we're able to give young people certifications through the community colleges for different applications. And I think that what I appreciate about that is that that along with being able to do college credits online while they're in our program, they're able to upskill themselves to get wages that are higher, and doing things that they really enjoy doing as well too. So, you know, drone training is an example. Being having that capacity to do that is rare here in Hawaii. Having the pilot capacity. So just those type of skill sets that we're trying to integrate in. And then I'd say that just lastly is the social innovation side is also really important, I think, in addition to technology. And I think for us, you know, I alluded to the certifications and the college credits, but we've really worked hard to create innovative partnerships. So one of them is with University of Hawaii and the other is with Arizona State University. And basically a young person can go through a program for us in a year. And as many of us who've been in academics know, when you finish college, you're in debt. You know, that's the normal trend. And that just creates more and more of that divide, right, when you leave college. But what we've been able to do, at least for the first few years while they're with us, is that they can do college online. And with our partnership with ASU, it's only $400 a course, and they only have to pay for it if they want the credits. And these are all the general requirements, the beginning areas. But what's really neat too is that we have layered in other grants. So actually we give out about $1 million in college funding in addition to paying our members, and they get healthcare and benefits. So what's really cool in my mind is that they finish the program, and the $400 per course that they take, that's, you know, 7 or 8 courses a year, it actually gets fully covered by the educational funds that we give them. So in addition, so they actually walk away with money in their pocket, getting paid benefits plus the college funding, and they walk away with a year of college that would have equivalently been about $50,000 at Tempe. And to me, that really creates equity in that it gives people, they don't have to geographically be in that same location to have the same access, and then also financially too. And so I think we're trying to find ways that we can create those innovations, both technology-wise and social innovation too.
And I would like to share that we at Tero have been asking ourselves that question. And one of the things that we decided to do was to launch an initiative that it is called Tecnodídenos. And it has been a ride, but that's another story. Long story short, we just finished 3 days of this remote connection between technologists and some of our indigenous partners and their trusted partners as well. And it was, you know, when we built Tecnodídenos, we built it with the question on whether it is viable for technologists and indigenous peoples to co-design technology that it is not imposed on indigenous people, that does not extract just information from indigenous peoples for another end. And we are still asking that question, right? That question is not sorted out based on these 3 days. What we did learn is that there are many indigenous technologies that are incredible. Just a few names, if you Google Keolu Fox, that it is a fellow Hawaiian, Jason Edward Lewis, you know, among others. And you know, when thinking about Jason, they have worked on protocols on AI and indigenous peoples. And those protocols, yes, they are related to AI, but they provide a good guidance on what are some of those good practices that everybody should follow when engaging with indigenous peoples on some of these topics, right? I think that one of the important things in this space is also acknowledge that there are many indigenous peoples that don't have the opportunity of participating in these events, right? And sharing their voices and sharing their different life experiences and perspectives on many of these issues. And I think that that might help expand the perspective of technologies on indigenous peoples and how they can actually work together in the future. In my case, I am not indigenous, I am mixed race. I am mestiza, as we call it in Latin America. And you know, for me, accepting these panels is hard because I do want to give that space to our indigenous partners. At the same time, I think it is a good opportunity to just share not only about what one partner is doing, but about many of them who are actually working amazingly. In these 3 days, just to give you an example, we had the conversation on solar-powered canoes for the Amazon. through an experience that it is called Cara Solar. And the initiative is done together with the Achuar Nation of Ecuador. And they have developed these solar canoes that are built by indigenous peoples, not only the canoe, but actually the entire electrical connections for the solar panels. They just get this and they build them and they can maintain them. So it doesn't matter if someone is there or not to maintain the canoe, they can do it themselves, right? And if they want to have 10 canoes, they can build the 10 canoes because that knowledge is already inserted in them, right? With their solar technicians, as they call themselves, right? So I think that it is a matter of having the will to go the extra mile to ensure that the technology that it is being developed is actually not imposed, it is co-designed, and it leads to indigenous people's self-determination.
Thank you. I would love to say in this sense, thank you so much for your reflection, Super John, Super Margarita. Well, it's a key question, Super David, what you say. In our experience, we have these words of Gustavo Gutierrez. No? He said, it's not about to being the voice of those who do not have it, but about fighting for them have it. So I think that the main question is how could we empower? No? How could we provide platforms? But the answer, we don't have it. No? Local people have it. In this sense, let me share you just a few images, please, Master Jean-Luc. So some images that we reflect about, we're reflecting about this question, how could we approach to local communities, not with technologies or not with solutions itself, no? But with connections and with the opportunity to create a relationship and grow together and learn together. No? So this is Symbio Creation. No? It's a methodology based in collaborations where you can integrate people, technologies, knowledge, cultures, whatever you want. It's inspired in symbiogenesis, no? Promoted by Leong Margulis, you know, this big, amazing biologist woman. And what do we do with that? No? We start to asking local people, no, what do you want to do? What is the impact that you want to generate? So they start to prototype with the resources, local resources that they have. And this is technology. The most amazing technology that we have is not a machine, it's not an algorithm. It's our creativity. It's the way that they put in action the knowledge that they have. No? So we started not only to promote this creation, this single creation, we start to connect the different proposals and create groups and community proposals. They identify that. So when they arrive to some solutions, for example, here, 200 young people creating one single solution in between all of them for their communities. They prototype with local resources, but then, after that they say, well, we need more capabilities to make this real. In this moment, we start to show what is technology or what is digital fabrication or synthetic biologies or another technology that could help them. But first of this, they have identified why they want to use that. No? So, and they will choose if this is functional or not for them. No? So we start with this methodology and start especially to integrate people, communities, knowledge, and technologies in different parts of Peru and Latin America. No? Thank you.
Thank you, Super Beno, Margarita, and John. A couple of comments from the chat. Corinne says the Kanaka Maoli have a genius system of resource management that recognizes the interconnectedness of mountains and sea and the role of fresh water connecting the two. Cecilia Vilca says, I believe we need to adapt technology together in a horizontal way, listening to the needs of indigenous peoples. Everybody can learn and know something to teach. Sherry, Fab Foundation. I think we could harmonize the technologies, the needs of sustainability by recognizing and embracing the innovation and sustainable traditional practices of indigenous communities and work with them, co-create current technologies that will continue those incredibly important traditions. And I saw that Maria Chavez has a question. I think we'll just this might be the last one, but we just want to just be sure. So, because I know we're pretty close. But Maria's question is, how best can the larger global community help support your work and our local indigenous communities? So this is the call to action that our panelists are putting out for the Global Bio Community Summit. Wait, the Global Community Bio Summit. Yes, sorry. All right, anybody, please. How can the global community help with your work and help local communities?
If I can start, I think that it would be really important to ask yourself, who are the indigenous peoples that are closest to you? I've heard many times here in the US, actually one person from Massachusetts, we were talking about this and I told this person, you should connect with indigenous peoples in your part, right? She was like, oh, but there are no indigenous peoples in Massachusetts. And I was like, no, that's not true, right? It is. So I think that the first step is learning, acknowledging that indigenous peoples are everywhere. And indigenous territories in many places are strong and vibrant. And in other places, indigenous peoples are still fighting to maintain what they have and strengthen what they have lost due to colonialism. So I get this question, and yes, I could tell you 1,000 stories of how you could support. And if you want me to tell you those stories, just write to me and I will tell you, oof, you're interested in this is a great idea. But I think that you can help first yourself by learning about indigenous peoples in the place where you are, acknowledging that you are on indigenous territories that were stolen, and read history a bit, because it is sometimes shocking and heartbreaking to understand what indigenous peoples here and elsewhere have gone through. Yeah, that would be my suggestion.
Yeah, I could add to that. Thank you, Margarita. I think for me, it maybe two ways I'd address this. One, if you are an indigenous person and looking to create change, that the world needs you. And I mean, it needs all of us that have the right hearts and seek to do what's pono, what is right, what is good in our world. But I think, specifically, as we share with our participants that, that there's something special in each of us that needs to get unlocked and needs to happen. And oftentimes, unfortunately, as I shared in the previous story, there's sometimes a stigma that some of our young people that are indigenous come in with it, that they feel that they don't have what it takes to really create a needle moving change, or to even just to make an impact in their own life. And I would just say that, that we need people to become the leaders that our world needs. I mean, we've seen what happens. Sometimes we think leadership is just a role and responsibility. And I think, as we're seeing in the world today, that's not the case. Leadership is really about providing a guiding light, providing a moral guidance, and bringing people with us upwards towards something better. And we need leaders that have been rooted in cultures that have values-based approaches to be able to take the lead and to show that leadership in our world. I think that if you're looking to support indigenous work, I would also say, the more we can find ways to have people that are funding or supporting this type of work look into specific communities, because I think that if you're looking at it from a global presence, that if you have resources, that we need to find ways, or folks in that area, we need to find links to get to local communities, because oftentimes, more than often, there's really amazing grassroots levels and work that's being done, and it needs elevation and support. And it's hard to get global attention on a really important project that's making life-changing impacts in communities in specific areas. So I would say, if we can make clear connections in terms of how do we fund and support. Funding is a double-edged sword. You can't give, I think funding has to be something that people are ready for, and too much funding could also sink something. But at the same time too, I think funding and also providing the growth and mentorship is also really important too. So thank you.
Thank you. Well, my strong suggestion is come to the jungle. Buy your ticket and come to the Amazon or go to Hawaii or maybe, but go to the, yeah, it's different when you are inside. No? Well, we know we have many restrictions today, but it's your opportunity to find cheaper tickets. So you can buy right now and separate your place. But well, I think this is what, no? Go and contact directly and live the experience and be part of the community. Margarita said, I am not indigenous, but indigenous is not about to born in the place, no? It's to have the herd, indigenous herd, no? So if you have it, if you feel this, so go to the communities and learn and live the cosmovision. This is the most important. And the other one is create bridge. You can create bridge. And for example, what is amazing during this last time, most of these communities have to accelerate also the process to digitalize communication, for example. So if you want to share your knowledge and learn from local communities, especially in the jungle here in the Amazon, I will love to create or support these connections. For example, to show what you are doing to young people here, and also they can learn you or show you what they are doing for water purification and for the different species that they have, etc. So this is the other suggestion: be proactive in the bridge construction. And thank you so much for this community. I think Bio-Sangmi community, considering this topic, it's amazing. No? I think in the Slack group, we can continue talking about this and creating more proposals for the future.
Omar, we have 5 minutes left. So if you can keep your question pretty brief so that the panelists have some time to respond, please go ahead.
Cool. Yeah, it's going to be super brief. So my question is really about creating that bridge to the community, to the indigenous communities, and knowing that, you know, where the indigenous communities that are here present in where I am now, and wanting to build that bridge and then communication with that community. How do you recommend doing that without like falling into common colonial tropes and coming in with like we're the saviors and we're going to teach you all this stuff, right? Like, how do you create that empathetic and collaborative bridge?
From my personal experience, in many parts of the world, indigenous peoples see through you. They see your heart very quickly and very clearly, right? And you have to build relationships that you are willing to maintain. It is not, oh, I just want to see who they are, but you have to go and listen. And it is like building a friendship, right? You have to nurture, you have to go through things together, you have to build your trust. You cannot rush things. You have to follow the pace of the relationship. And with that, if you are authentic and if you are truthful, your relationship will flourish. Just avoid rushing. Sometimes people just want to rush because they want to do things quickly. And sometimes the best way of destroying opportunities and destroying relationships is when you try to rush. That would be my suggestion.
Yeah, that's really beautiful, Margarita. And I'd say to add to that, you know, in building that relationship is coming in with humility and gratitude and respect for. I think sometimes, Omar, what you're sharing about how some people come in with the savior mentality, it's that they have everything to offer to the other person, and I think the reality is it's a two-way street, and if you don't come in with that mentality that there's so much to learn and gain, and I'm only here to give because I have, you know, resources or whatever, then you're missing out on the beauty of the relationship and the opportunity to really build a authentic bridge that is not just based on a transaction, but based on a relationship. So.
Yeah, amazing. One more, well, I totally agree with Margarita, super young, but maybe just a functional suggestion. Learn the language. It's different when you approach with their language, not with your language.
So very quickly, Walter, hermano Candor, ¿tienes unas palabras? Is he there? I don't think. I don't know if he...
Maybe Maestro Walter.
Okay, he's probably he's probably away. Okay. Well, I wanted to thank everybody here, all of the attendees, all for your thoughtful comments and your questions. Maria, thank you for your thoughtful emceeing of this event. Thank you to David, and thank you to Beno, Margarita, and John. Very beautiful panel. Oh, Allison as well. Thank you for keeping us on time, keeping us in our community agreements. So once again, please enjoy your weekend, and we look forward to building together. Thank you. Tikach.